All right, hello, welcome back everyone. We are going to kind of round out our section on police, just talking about the structure of police organizations and the different types of agencies that exist in the United States. So if you remember from one of our earlier videos, there are like over 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers across local/state agencies in the United States. And then at the federal level, there's about 137,000 officers. So taken together, local and state level organizations employ about 85% of all sworn law enforcement, and the federal agencies employ about 15% of sworn law enforcement. So this kind of distribution highlights the substantial numerical superiority of state and local law enforcement officers compared to their federal counterparts. States and local law enforcement agencies in the U.S. differ from federal agencies in several key ways, which we're going to get into in this talk. So, kind of before we move on to those big differences, real quick, the types of agencies that we're going to be talking about. So when I say state and local law enforcement, I'm talking at the state level. That's like your Department of Public Safety, so DPS, which has the traffic enforcement or troopers, and the Texas Rangers, the investigative body here in Texas. In other states, they aren't necessarily split off like that. It's just like their state police. You also have like Fish and Wildlife, which are statewide organization, or in other places they're referred to as like conservation officers, whatever their title is, at the state level. And then if we go broad state and zoom in kind of each layer, you have state and then county. At the county level here in Texas, you have sheriff's offices, so your sheriff is elected. They then employ deputies who work both in jails or doing like patrol, responding to calls, things like that. They are responsible for patrolling and responding to calls in unincorporated areas, so places in the county that are not part of the city. You also have constables here, so they're elected peace officers. They typically serve like civil processes, so they're doing things like administering eviction notices, and things like that. And then depending on where they are, they might assist like sheriff's departments and local police departments as needed. Then if we kind of zoom even further in, just in terms of size or potential scope of their jurisdiction, you have like municipal/city police departments. So cities and towns have their own police departments that are headed by a chief of police. These departments are responsible for local law enforcement, including engaging in things like patrol, investigations, and different community policing efforts. Then if you're in a place that has a university, universities have their own police departments, right? So they ensure the safety and security on campus. They have jurisdiction over the campus property and sometimes its surrounding areas. At the federal level, though, we have many law enforcement agencies, right? So first we have the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They are committed to, or their core values include rigorous obedience to the Constitution, respect for citizens' dignity, fairness, and accountability. Really what they are doing, or their focus includes criminal investigations, intelligence and investigative technologies, and counterterrorism efforts. Then there's the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA. Their mission is to enforce the controlled substances laws and regulations of the United States and bring to the criminal and civil justice system any organizations and members involved in the growing, manufacture, and distribution of controlled substances. We have the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. It has two main components. So you have Homeland Security investigations and then enforcement and removal operations. Their main mission is to protect America from cross-border and illegal immigration that primarily threatens national security and public safety. The U.S. Secret Service, which is split into a uniform division and a special agent division. Their mission is to safeguard the financial infrastructure and payment systems of the United States from a wide range of financial and electronic-based crimes. It also protects national leaders, visiting heads of state, and other designated individuals. We have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which is the ATF. They have several divisions within the ATF, including like a Field Operations Division, the Office of Enforcement Programs, and the Office of Science and Technology. Their mission is to protect communities from violent criminals, criminal organizations, and illegal use and trafficking of firearms, and illegal use and storage of explosives, acts of arson and bombings, acts of terrorism, and the illegal diversion of alcohol and tobacco products. And then finally, we have the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So their mission is to safeguard America's borders, thereby protecting the public from dangerous people and materials while enforcing hundreds of U.S. regulations, including immigration and drug laws. So you have several different federal entities all working to do different things, and then within state and local level policing agencies, we have their kind of primary purposes as well, right? So getting back to kind of the big differences. So if we look at the jurisdiction and jurisdictional authority, for state and local agencies, they have jurisdiction that's limited to specific geographic areas, such as the city that the department it is in. So like the San Marcos Police Department's jurisdiction is limited to the city of San Marcos. The county that it is in, so the Hays County Sheriff's Department, is limited to the Hays County borders, right, as its jurisdiction. And the state, so Texas state troopers don't have the same jurisdiction, or they only have jurisdiction in Texas. They can't pull you over in Louisiana, right? That's not within their jurisdiction. So their jurisdictional authority is limited to wherever their agency is. City departments, for example, handle kind of thinking about the types of crimes. So they handle local crimes and maintain order within their city limits, while sheriffs might cover like unincorporated areas and assist in bigger like county-wide issues. Okay, so you could have sheriffs assisting in things that are happening in Kyle Buda, parts of Buda, I guess, Kyle, San Marcos, which are all in Hays, where like a San Marcos PD officer may be limited to working on cases in San Marcos. Federal law enforcement agencies such as the FBI, DEA, and ATF, all of the ones that I had mentioned before, any of those have jurisdiction over the entire United States and can investigate crimes that cross state lines or involve federal laws. They also handle cases that involve national security, organized crime, and other major federal offenses. Okay, so when we think about the types of laws that are being enforced between like local versus federal, or state/local versus federal agencies, at the state and local level, those agencies are enforcing state and local laws. So state police may patrol highways and assist local agencies while city police focus on local ordinances and state laws within their city and the application of those within their city. Federal agencies enforce federal laws, which include a wide range of crimes such as drug trafficking, terrorism, cybercrime, and interstate crimes. They also handle cases that involve violations of federal regulations, such as those related to like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. When we think a little bit about, so I already mentioned that most of our people are employed at both the local and state level, right? Kind of moving along to like funding, differences in funding and resources between that state/local level versus federal agencies. So at the state and local level, state and local law enforcement agencies are primarily funded through state and local budgets. So this includes revenue from taxes like property taxes or sales tax, and it sometimes includes federal grants. So they've applied for a grant, they get that money, they're able to use it at their agency. So the funding available to these agencies often depends on the economic health of the state or locality. So in times of economic downturns, you can see these agencies facing budget cuts or reduced resources, right? If they're getting most of their money from taxpayers, especially property taxes, if property taxes decrease, if property is less valuable, that is less funding flowing into the government to then be allocated to those police places, right? State and local agencies may receive grants from federal programs such as the Community-Oriented Policing Services grants, or COPS grants as they're known. These can kind of help fund additional officers and other initiatives or like equipment, training, what have you. At the federal level, federal law enforcement agencies are funded through the federal budget, which is allocated by Congress. So this provides a more stable and often larger funding source compared to state and local budgets. Federal agencies may have access to specialized funding sources, such as asset forfeiture funds, which allows them to seize and use assets from criminal enterprises to fund their operations. So if you bring in a criminal and you get all of the money that they've made through their criminal enterprise, that money can then be allocated to the federal law enforcement kind of budget and be used for it. And that is not the case at the local level. Federal agencies are also the ones that administer various grant programs, so they are the ones kind of like providing funding then to state and local law enforcement agencies for specific initiatives. So they are soliciting, they're saying, hey, do you want some money from us? Apply, right? In line with funding, we also have varying amounts of resources available between both our state/local places and federal agencies. So at the state and local level, those agencies typically have fewer personnel compared to federal agencies, just like per department. Okay, so the number of officers and support staff is often limited by the available budget. So yes, there are far more people that work at the local and the local/state level overall, but that's across 18,000 plus individual agencies versus at the federal level, it's fewer people across fewer agencies, right? So per agency going to be fewer overall at the state and local level because they're stretched across so many different places. So while state and local agencies provide training and equipment to their officers, the scope and quality may vary based on funding. Some agencies may have access to advanced training programs and equipment, while others may be more limited, just depending on the resources or like the funding that they have available to them. The availability of advanced technology, such as crime analysis software, forensic labs, and communication systems, can vary widely among state and local agencies. So larger departments may have more resources, while smaller departments may have limited access to that same technology. At the federal level, federal agencies generally have a larger workforce with specialized units and highly trained personnel. They can recruit from a national pool of candidates and often have more extensive training programs. Federal agencies provide extensive training and access to specialized equipment. So, for example, the FBI Academy and the DEA Training Academy offer comprehensive training programs for their agents. So you're there for months learning new things and being trained. Federal agencies have access to cutting-edge technology and resources, including advanced forensic labs, intelligence analysis tools, and sophisticated communication systems. They often lead in the development and implementation of new technologies in law enforcement, which is pretty cool. In terms of like the structure of state versus state and local versus federal agencies. So the federal agencies, each individual agency that I listed before, all fall under like either the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security, right? So they're existing under a department. The agencies themselves are flatter, and they obviously report directly to those folks in charge of the federal government. At the end of the day, at the county level, you have your elected sheriff and their deputies. At the city level, you have like a chief of police and then maybe some assistant chiefs, and then commanders or captains, and then lieutenants, and then sergeants, and then detectives or corporals, and then at the very bottom, like patrol regular officer level folks is kind of how those are structured. So very hierarchical, a very vertical structure in local policing. Those like city police departments report to like a city council. So that's who you answer to. That's who's funding your department. That's who's making the decisions about how many positions will be approved in the budget and all of that stuff, right? And then at the state level, it can be similar to, in terms of structure, similar to those city kind of departments funded by the state, obviously, not like a city in particular, but like the state government funds the state police. They're going to also be kind of hierarchical, but really the thing about it is like they're all very disjointed, decentralized. It's not like they're all working together. Like all of the organizations or all of the agencies in Hays County are working together. They're not. They're still like independent agencies, right? Versus like all of the agencies under the DOJ have like kind of an overarching mission or vision, right? That they're ultimately trying to work towards. So they have the same big boss. So we already talked a bit about that funding and resource comparison, right? So not going to go over that again, but here, if you want to pause and take some notes about what I said, you can do that here. So really the big things are the federal government and the federal police agencies have a lot more funds and access to resources at their disposal compared to those state and local agencies. Again, the structure, so if we think about this a little bit more here, so we have the state and local agencies that operate, and they all have very diverse roles. So if we're going to dig in a little bit deeper here to the state and local kind of structure specifically. So at the state level, again, you have those like highway patrol, investigative bodies potentially, and they're providing that statewide coverage through oftentimes regional offices and specialized units. So you don't have a state police office in every single city. It's across regions. At the county level, you have one like sheriff and potentially constables. Those are all elected officials, and they're, operating the jails and providing court security and doing like some responses to calls for service in those unincorporated areas. And then at the local level, that's going to be those municipal or city departments, focusing oftentimes on things like community policing and local crime prevention and maintaining public order, that kind of stuff. So when we think about those like big three goals of law enforcement, enforcing the laws, maintaining public order, and providing services, that's going to apply most directly or most clearly to those like municipal / local level and maybe the county level departments, I think, just in terms of how much they're interacting with folks and the types of things that they're doing. Like a trooper is probably going to do less service provision than a like San Marcos City police officer, right? The trooper is going to do more law enforcement and potentially order maintenance depending on where they are located and whatnot than they are like providing services. But all that is to say, policing has several levels across all of the different types of agencies. It's not just like one boss and everybody else below them. It is a hierarchy. There are several, there's a lot of upward mobility in the job, especially at the state and local level. But that can also be an issue when it comes to like how the people at the very bottom are impacted over time, all of that, right? Like if I feel like my agency doesn't support me or is just so far removed, the people at the top are so far removed from like what it's actually like on the street, that can potentially cause some disruptions in the well-being of the organization. So focusing on Texas specifically, if you are not from here or if you are, we have our different kinds of law enforcement agencies represented here, right? So again, that state level, we have the Department of Public Safety. It oversees that statewide kind of enforcement. So with them, they have the Texas Rangers and the Texas Highway Patrol, as well as Texas Anti-Gang Centers. So DPS is responsible for statewide law enforcement, including highway patrol and criminal investigations, as well as emergency management. The Highway Patrol is the division of DPS that focuses on that traffic enforcement and safety on the highways. They also assist local law enforcement with various investigations at times. The Rangers are this elite investigative unit within DPS. They handle major crimes and investigate things like public corruption and border security issues. At the local level, you have your sheriff's departments, you have your constables, right? Then you have your kind of city departments at the municipal level. And then there are also university police departments if you live in a university town. The representation of federal law enforcement, you do still have a little bit of that here. So there are FBI field offices in Texas, including in cities like Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. So they handle federal crimes such as terrorism, cybercrime, and organized crime that may be occurring here. They have drug enforcement administration offices as well in Texas. So they work closely with state and local agencies to address drug-related crimes. And then there are Marshals Service offices here, so they're responsible for protecting federal courts and ensuring the effective operation of the judicial system. So we have a federal court here in Texas, so they are here to do that. They also handle fugitive operations and witness security as necessary. So that's a little bit about what's happening here and the types of agencies that exist here. Another thing that you can note is that there are task forces that are formed by like the federal department. So you can work for a local police department. So you could work for like Austin or San Antonio and be on like an ATF task force or a DEA task force where like you're not employed by the federal agency, but you're on a task force with some folks that are, and that's kind of to make up for the fact that they don't have as many people to send out to all of their field offices, you know. So that is an option potentially if that is a route that you are considering and you're not sure if you want to for sure get into the federal side of things. That is always a potential option. Okay, so that kind of finishes up like what the broad strokes, the very kind of like quick information about police as a whole in the United States, right? Like how we got from where it started with like slave patrols and all that, and the night watch to where we are now and what types of agencies we have now. With that, I will bid you adieu, and we will reconvene in the next video and talk about what happens after someone gets arrested.